matter what, we come together for the good of our constituents, and I'm proud and honored to lead the People's House of the New York State Legislature.
The health and protection of the human beings that live in our districts is our responsibility.
Frederick Douglass's words for us today, I quote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress."
If you want equity to happen, then this is where it happens.
All of us have a responsibility to the greater good.
The House will come to order.
Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Liz Koenig. Today we're going to be talking about some housing issues in the 81st Assembly District. And joining me now to discuss this topic is our guest, Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, who represents the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
I know you're extremely busy with the budget process in full swing, hopefully wrapping up soon. But we wanted to take some time to talk about a few things that have been going on in your district in regards to housing. You recently attended a meeting on amalgamated houses. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what that is, and then what the meeting was about?
Sure. The amalgamated houses is possibly the greatest housing development in the country, and I'm not saying that facetiously or anything. Mm-hmm. It really is. The amalgamated houses, the construction of the first building started 95 years ago. It's the oldest, it's called limited equity or limited dividend housing corporation in the country, and there are close to 1,500 units of housing in the amalgamated. It's like middle class, working class people, and great housing. I mean, the apartments are beautiful, the neighborhood is beautiful. It's really been the anchor of the whole area for, since before I was born. The newest buildings in the amalgamated are actually over 50 years old, the towers. So the other buildings are even older than that. And they have some issues there. When buildings are old, you have to maintain them. There's constant repair of, boilers and roofs and, you name it. And so in order to maintain this development, it takes a lot of work and money, and in the past few years, they realized that there's just tens of millions of dollars of rehab that has to be done throughout the complex, and this is not. This is mainly due to age. All apartment buildings need to replace elevators at some point or some of the other systems in the building, and so some years ago, not too many years ago, they wanted to arrange for loans, which is normally how an apartment building would get the funding to do the work that needs to be done, except in the case of the amalgamated, there's supervision by the State Housing Agency, HCR, Homes and Community Renewal. And, well, I'm not trying to point fingers, but it seems to me that HCR, I believe, kind of dragged their feet in terms of approving some of the loans. They really made the amalgamated jump through extra hoops, and HCR has to do its due diligence, of course, but the delay in approving the amalgamated's ability to get some of the loans has resulted in huge expenses. Huge expenses. Why? Because in the past few years, interest rates have skyrocketed. So the loan that they could have taken out, or loans, just a few years ago, now would be much more expensive. And according to the management at the amalgamated, it would cost them over a 30-year period $2 million extra per year for the loans because of the higher interest rates. And that's just outrageous. Personally, I think the state ought to make up the difference because of the delays, which I think they're in good part responsible for. But in addition, one of the things that has to be done because of some of the requirements in New York City, they're going to have to do major work on the gas, the stoves connect to the gas lines. Mm-hmm. And in 800 of the apartments, and as I said, there were close to 1,500 apartments, so it's over half the units in the development, they're facing a gas turnoff starting July 1st. And of course, that's a big hardship. Now, we've had a number of buildings in my district where they did turn off the gas. Con Ed may have deemed it unsafe, so they have to, go through a number of steps to fix the problem, and then get the sign off by Department of Buildings, Con Edison, and so on. But in the Amalgamated, in addition to 800 apartments facing these turnoffs, they don't have the money to do the work. They just don't. And I think given the circumstances, it would be preferable for the state to step in and help them out. The governor has rightly made housing a centerpiece of her budget. She wants 800,000 new units of housing in the coming years. And she's come up with a number of ways to make that happen, some of which make sense, some of which some people disagree about. But key to having enough housing is maintaining the housing we already have, and especially housing in the Amalgamated. Now, my mother lived for many years in the Amalgamated. My brother and his family lived for many years in the Amalgamated. So I'm very, very familiar. Other than representing them, I'm intimately familiar with everything that's amalgamated. And it's this development was built by the Amalgamated Textile Workers Union. I think that's the exact name. Back in the day. This was really workers, people from the Bronx. And if we can't maintain and preserve this housing, then shame on all of us. So we have to do everything we can on this. So in the recent fiscal hearings, the housing hearing in particular, I questioned the state housing commissioner on this, and I gave her the background. I said, the state is at least partially responsible for the pickle that they're in right now, and the state has to therefore be part of the solution. And up until now, I don't see that they've been at all part of the solution. And in fact, leadership from the Amalgamated also testified at that hearing. And I feel horrible because they're trying to do everything right. They're working hard. Their board of directors, these are all volunteers who give so much time to keeping this beautiful community beautiful, and yet they're facing such an uphill struggle right now. So I think we have to do everything we can. I attended a meeting last night on Zoom from Albany. Zoom was amazing. Mm-hmm. You can be hundreds of miles away and still be there. And I sat through the entire meeting because I really wanted to hear what every person had to say. And, people are rightfully upset, concerned. Why is this happening? How could, how could this have gone on so long? How could the state agency have not been helpful? They were less than helpful. And people, people really want answers, and they deserve answers. So something needs to be done. Maybe some things can be done on the city level as well. The fact is some of the requirements that the city has also add to the costs, requirements in terms of local law 11, local law 97. There's a whole bunch of local laws that impose huge costs on housing, not just the Amalgamated. And while those laws may make sense, they're certainly there for a good reason, the fact is, ultimately, people have to pay to follow those laws. So we have a lot of work to do with the Amalgamated, and we have to fight. We really have to fight to make sure the Amalgamated continues to be the strong, incredible community that it's always been.
Are there any concerns that there may be rent increases attached to this?
Well, yeah. It's called the carrying charges because it's a co-op. But yes, there will be increases. Anytime there are additional expenses, there will be increases. What we don't want to see are astronomical, prohibitive increases, because the Amalgamated has always been affordable housing for working class people. There are people who've lived in the Amalgamated. There are some people who've lived there for 50 years. This development, as I said, has been around for 95 years. Many of the buildings were built in the 40s, and some people have lived there since, older people have lived there in many cases since they were kids. And then there were a lot of new people there as well. So it's a good mix of new and longer standing residents. It's a co-op. It's not a co-op where you can sell when you move out on the open market, but it's a co-op nonetheless, which means that people have a stake in it. They don't pay rent, and I hope that most people there don't think of themselves as paying rent, but whether it's rent or carrying charges, it's still, if they get a huge increase, it's this, it's still a lot of money for people, and these are not wealthy people that we're talking about.
Let's move on and talk about Cannon Heights. What's happening there?
Cannon Heights is a Mitchell-Lama in my district, and Mitchell-Lama it's similar to what the Amalgamated is. The Amalgamated is organized under Article 4 of the State Housing Finance Law, and the Mitchell-Lama is under Article 2. The first Mitchell-Lama is in the state, and Mitchell-Lama has been possibly the most successful housing program we've ever had in New York State. But Park Reservoir, which is kind of sibling buildings to the Amalgamated, the buildings there were the first Mitchell-Lamas in the state. Cannon Heights is a Mitchell-Lama. I don't know how old the building is, but I'm going to estimate 1960-ish. Always been a beautiful building. Again, working people, middle class, and they are facing huge rent increases. I said it's not rent, but it's carrying charge increases. They were going to get a 3-year phased-in 24% increase. There've been a lot of expenses, inflation, and that barely keeps up with inflation. But now they're being told they may face an additional 44% increase. Why? Largely because the insurance that they have to carry, it's called umbrella insurance, it's for the building, that the company, any company that would provide insurance, and it may be only one, they are raising the rates incredibly by huge amounts, and I'm not even sure they're going to give the same coverage, but they have to have insurance. They have to have insurance. So because of that, the people there are being told that they're going to face, in addition to the 24% increase, a 44% increase in their carrying charges. Now that's prohibitive for some people living there. Some of the people who are 62 years or older may be eligible for SCREE, which means they can get a freeze on their carrying charges, but that's probably a limited number of people. There's about, I think it's like 170 or so apartments in the building, beautiful apartments, but for most of the people, they're facing enormous increases. So when we talk about increasing housing in the state, when we talk about 800,000 units of new housing, I believe that our first priority ought to be to preserve the housing that we already have, make sure that people can still afford to live in that housing. And yes, we do need more units of housing, but it would be kind of foolish to have new housing and sort of toss the old housing aside. That would make no sense at all. So we have a lot of work to do.
Well, especially since you said so many people live there like almost their whole lives, or
Yep.
their whole lives. So yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, thank you so much. We'll look forward to another update soon, and we want to hear about the budget also. Hopefully next time we see you, we're at least close to a solution for the state
Okay,
budget.
well, thank you.
Thanks. We've been speaking with Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, who represents the 81st Assembly District in the Bronx. Thank you so much for joining us today on Assembly Update. We'll see you next time.